Hey everyone, Alon Mizrahi here. This is the Mizrahi perspective. A lot is going on, a lot to digest. So we're going to start with the most simple, basic, fundamental political question, which is true and necessary and relevant always, always, which is the kind of questions I like, to be honest. This question is, what is happening? Okay, this is the first and the most radical and the most important political question. What is happening? And what is happening now is genocide in Palestine. This is what's happening. This is the big defining political event currently unfolding. This is what's happening. So no confusion, no distraction, no not knowing where to look. We know where to look. We know what's happening. Genocide in Palestine. Israel is committing genocide and killing masses of innocent Palestinians, starving them, bombing them, torturing them, ethnically cleansing them, and trying to do more of this. And this is what's happening. And we are not confused and we are not distracted. So we answered the first question quickly and efficiently. Now we have entered the what I call the split personality phase of this genocide. And why do I call it split personality? We started to see signs of actual split. And split is key in this video, is key in this era, in this phase. We are starting to see European countries losing patience with Israel and starting to voice this impatience and also starting to take actual concrete steps to stop Israel. This is only beginning, but it is nevertheless noticeable. And it is real, and I believe it. Some people don't believe it. And this is another issue and a subject for another video. About people who always want to stay in the dark and despair mode, which is not what I do. Even when I say, like in my previous video, that there are no cracks, it is not to sow despair. It is to let people see truth as I see it at a certain moment and to drive them to draw the right conclusions and take the right actions as required by this understanding. It is never about giving up. It is never about everything is lost. I don't have this. With me, there's never everything is lost. This notion doesn't exist. But it's not for this video. I believe the signs that we are seeing coming out mainly out of Europe, and surely they have friends and parties and people that help them, encourage them, work with them outside of the West, okay, in other countries. So this is the beginning of the split. And as I've been saying in previous videos, and I've written about this a lot, what Israel is doing, the Israel style, okay, is driving everyone and forcing everyone to make a choice. You cannot escape the choice Israel is forcing you to make. No one is going to be able to escape this and avoid this. Every human being, and I'm not even joking, eventually will have to choose between Zionism and sanity, life and death. We are all going to have to make this choice. And some Europeans are beginning to understand this and are beginning to distance themselves from Israel. And this is a very good and encouraging sign and process that's beginning to materialize. What's happening in the US is completely different. What we're seeing behind me happened yesterday. You must have all seen it by now. This is Trump sitting with the president, the South African president, and telling him and his delegation that there's a genocide of white people in Africa, which is, how is this not a comedy sketch? I mean, this is a stand-up. This is stand-up material. This is not, I mean, how can Trump say it with a straight face? And the people around him, J.D. Vance and all the rest of them, I mean, this is just hilarious. Talking about Africa in the context of white suffering it's really the stuff of stand-up. Nevertheless, we saw it yesterday in the White House. And this brings me to the second political question. Who is trying to benefit, or who is trying to shape perception in what we're seeing? And I'll let you know what I mean, because yesterday morning or evening, depending on where you are, everybody in the world spoke about Israel starving Palestinians. This was the subject. Everyone spoke about it in French Parliament and talk shows in the UK, on Sky News, on BBC, even on CNN. I saw Dominique de Villepin, the former French prime minister. I don't think he was president. I think he was prime minister. And he spoke with very harsh and specific terms about what Europe should be doing, cutting relations, arms embargo, very concrete and radical sounding steps which should have been spoken and enacted on a year and a half ago. And still they sound radical because no one talks about it. So everyone was talking about Israel starving the Palestinian yesterday morning. 24 hours later, people are talking about this show in the White House, about the white genocide in Africa, and this is the nature of disruption. You throw something very stupid and foolish and baseless into the conversation, and now people are forced to talk about it. Some idiots would say this is right, and he's so courageous. I saw some right-wing influencers saying this. Trump is so courageous for saying something that no one dares say about the great suffering of white people in Africa. This is yes. And in the evening, there was this incident, this terror attack. This is what we directed to call it in Washington. And I have to say something about this because yesterday evening, around 6:30, in like Mexico time, where I am, I published a Substack post, and I reminded people of a certain event from 2001 that no one remembers. A big, major event with serious implications for the Middle East, and specifically for Israel and Zionism, and no one remembers it. And it happened just days apart from the other big event of 2001 that everybody does remember. And in this text, I anticipated a terrorist attack or a supposed terrorist attack in Europe or the US. Something much bigger than what we saw yesterday. And I think it is still coming. Nevertheless, 2 hours after I posted, 2 or 3 hours after I posted that Substack text, this thing in Washington happened. I still think that we are, unless some people get a grip, okay, we are going to see something much worse on a much bigger scale in Europe or the US. And it's going to be terrorism, and it's probably going to be Iran. This is what I think is very plausible. So we don't know what exactly happened, and we don't know what exactly is the meaning of this show at the White House. But what we do know is that yesterday morning, everyone was talking about Gaza and the starvation, and something must be done about Gaza. And 24 hours later, everyone was talking about something else. And who benefited or who benefits from this loss of focus on Gaza? The answer is very clear. The answer is very clear. The bigger story here, because we're not going to talk about, and this isn't what I do, what happened, and does this make sense exactly, or who said what and who did what and how they behaved at a certain moment. Maybe sometimes I speak about this, but this is never my main interest. My main interest is the big story. And the big story here is Israel splitting not only humanity, it is now splitting the West. This is where we're going. This is where we already are, in a way, because we are beginning to see signs of a split between Europe and the US over Israel. I call it the split personality phase because in this phase that we're in now, it seems like parts of the world, parts of the West already understand that what Israel is doing is terrible. It's not only terrible morally, it is terrible for their political stability, for their image, for their future, for the future of the region, for the future of humanity. We can see signs that this recognition is beginning to take root. But on the other hand, at the same time, they don't do what's necessary. They don't do what's required, what they are obliged to do when they have this recognition. So this is what I call the split personality. They recognize what Israel is doing is terrible and very scary for them and their future, but still they are hesitant to take the necessary actions to stop it. So this is one aspect of this split personality, but also the split personality between the US and Europe, where we see very clear and specific descriptions of what Israel is doing in Europe. We are seeing very little of this in the US, and it seems like the US has been fooling us. It is being very unpredictable. This is the Trump style. Okay, he never commits. You never know where he stands. You know his character. You know what he's prone to do. I mean, it's not a big mystery. But when there's a decision that needs to be made, this is similar to Netanyahu. it's very hard to know where he stands, and it's hard for him to lead and be clearly in one place. He likes to enjoy the benefit of doubt and confusion. This empowers him. When he destabilizes you, it makes him feel empowered. This is again a psychological or psychiatric trait, because this is not how mature and normal people behave. You don't create always doubt and confusion for other people in order to feel strong and in control. This is a terrible personal trait. Nevertheless, this is the Trump style, and he does it. And there were times, or there were points in the past couple of months where it looked like Trump may be beginning to understand that he has to break with Israel, that he has to contain Israel. Contain is a very important concept in this. Because what we have been seeing for a long time, for decades, is a complete refusal on the part of Western countries to contain Israel in any way, in any meaningful way. Israel has been given a license to do whatever it wants, to whomever it wants, wherever it wants, on Europe, on European land, in the US, in the West Bank, in Gaza, in Lebanon, wherever it wants. It could do whatever it wants. And what this genocide has been doing is it is letting people see that this was wrong, that this is terrible and dangerous for them. And I want to talk a little bit about why this split between Europe and the US. This is an interesting political and cultural conversation to have. Why is Europe able to at least give us the signs and show us that it understands that what Israel is doing is wrong and needs to stop? And they begin to understand, this is my impression, that Israel needs to be contained, whereas the US is completely lost under Zionist control and almost mind control. What is the cause of this difference? So I want to talk a little bit about what causes this difference, this split between Europe and the US, which I think is going to increase. The difference in attitude towards Israel at such a sensitive and critical time between the US and Europe, I think is going to lead to a serious confrontation between these two powers, these two continents. But we'll see about it. What does Europe have that the US doesn't have and allows Europe to be more in the moment and have an understanding that is related to reality, when the US is completely lost in space? Because it's obvious that Trump is doing this South Africa trick or play on behalf of Israel. South Africa took Israel to the International Court of Justice with an allegation, with the genocide allegation. And Israel is using the US to turn this on South Africa and blame South Africa for doing a white genocide. I mean, this is so obvious why he's doing this, and it's obvious why he's doing this at this moment in time. As the whole world begins to focus on what Israel is doing in Gaza, Trump is breaking that with this ridiculous accusation. And also he floats this golden dome. I mean, the stuff America is occupied with, it is just unbelievable. The gap between what Americans experience and how they live their lives and what the political system and media tells them about life and about what's going on and about what's important. This is the stuff of nightmare. This is 1984 on steroids. I mean, the American president sits there and talks about a golden dome costing trillions with space and lasers. I mean, to defend from whom? To defend against what? What alien invasion is going to come to the US and they're going to have to use their lasers? Who's going to attack the US? Who's going to go to war with the US for what? It has no neighbors that are willing or capable of attacking it. Why would Russia or China go to war with the US with missiles, with intercontinental missiles that would require the US to install this $1 trillion or trillions of dollars worth of lasers and machines and computers in space to stop this? I mean, this is so utterly insane. This is not in reality. This is not in reality at all. I mean, there are so many things that America needs to be able to have normal lives, a normal life, like daycare for children, like maternal leave, like normal food that's not poisoned, like walkable neighborhoods, like a sense of community and meaning and purpose. So many things that Americans desperately need, and the cost of living, and how impossible it is to buy a home in the US if you don't come from a rich family. All the things that are truly about life, but the American political system is only talking about Israel and space and China. This is unbelievable. I see it and I can't believe it. This is not the subject of this video but I mentioned it and I can't not say anything about it. This is heartbreaking. This truly is, because with all the criticism I have about America and Americans and American culture, and I have tons of it, I still have compassion and pity for Americans, for the way they have to live. And this supposedly endlessly rich country with stock markets rising and rising and rising, and trillions and Saudi Arabia and spacecraft and space weapons and space force, and what kind of reality do they live every day where they don't have the minimum security in any field of life? This is truly dystopian. This is dystopian. But Trump is doing this bit for Israel, and this is very clear. So while Europe stays in reality, the US has gone into space, basically. And this is where it's hiding from life. So why is this happening? I'm going to go over quickly over the reasons I think make the difference between Europe and the US. The first one, which I spoke about before and I will keep on speaking about, is the issue of identity. And it is critical. And this is, I think, my contribution to the discourse about anti-colonialism and decolonization. This is key. European countries have a solid sense of identity. The Scots know who they are. Okay, the French know who they are, what they stand for. They have a national history that makes sense to them. They are French. It's not all good, and it doesn't always make sense, but still it exists. It allows them to be for something or against something from solid ground. And it's true for many countries in Europe and many ethnic groups in Europe. The Swedes know who they are. They have a story. They have a history. The Spaniards know who they are and where they come from and what they want their society and other societies to be, and so on and so on. But the US doesn't have an identity. The US only has a media campaign, an ongoing media campaign that is supposed to be a replacement for identity. Even the Constitution, I mean, some people gathered, and I said this many times, the fact that 5 or 10 white people met in some room and came up with some document that has nothing to do with life and reality, it was as disconnected from life as is this meeting of Trump with the South African president. This doesn't create a sense of identity and meaning for a society. This is just some white people intellectualizing and creating an image for themselves that they want to have. This has nothing to do with the true, authentic sense of identity, like every Palestinian or every Egyptian or every Yemeni kid has naturally, without intellectualizing anything. So Europe has a sense of identity, so it makes it a lot easier for Europeans to stand for something or to oppose something. And you can see that in Europe, societies are still political, whereas in the US, people are in coma. People are in paralysis. This is also, I'm talking and I'm being reminded of other things I want to talk about, major issues, like the fact that the US is not present, I mean, politically, in terms of the political conversation. The US is absent, completely absent, from the most devastating and most catastrophic and most talked about event in recent history, which is the Gaza genocide. The Democrats won't even acknowledge it. They live in a world where this never happened and never happens, and it's not going on. They lost the election over this. They showed moral cowardice, and I won't start with this. But they want, and the Democratic Party is a machine with trillions of dollars, with endless access to endless, enormous, gigantic media operations. It is a huge beast, the Democratic Party. It's tens of millions of people. And it is not in reality. It is not in reality. It won't acknowledge that the genocide is going on. Can you, I mean, I say it and this needs to be studied. It doesn't make sense. It's contrary to normalcy, to what normal people are expected to do, and how they are expected to react to reality. And the Republican side is the same. They won't recognize, they won't acknowledge that something is going on because it contradicts their made up, and everything is made up because the identity is made up. They won't react to it because it contradicts where the made up stance that they have politically. This is amazing. And this goes back to a sense of identity that Americans don't have. So they have to be always brainwashed with names and brands and titles and trends, okay? So this is one reason Europe can be in reality and see what's going on, even under the immense pressure that Israel and the US use against it. Some parts of Europe, and not tiny parts, but meaningful, healthy, strong parts of Europe, talk about the genocide. The other thing that Europe has and the US doesn't is proximity. The genocide is happening basically right on Europe's doorstep. This is not a faraway event, the exotic event that they only see here and there on the news. This is very close to home. And the implications are very close to home. I mean, the same thing if a war with Iran breaks. The implications for Europe are different from the implications for the US. The US is isolated with an ocean on either side. It's not true for Europe. If a major catastrophic event in the Middle East happens and waves of immigrants start washing ashore in Europe, it's going to be a big problem for them. And they see this differently from the US. For the US, it's completely a made up question of who they stand with, the idiotic story of what they represent. They represent democracy. As they bomb half the planet, they represent democracy. As they support dictators and torture camps, they represent values. This is the American story. This is like mentally they are 4-year-old, no older than 4. This is the level of maturity of American political discourse. So Europe has identity and the US doesn't. Europe is closer and the US is far away. What's more on my list? Another thing that Europe has that the US doesn't is Europe has a left wing. Europe has socialism. Europe still has a working class with rights. So naturally, the political discourse in Europe generally is much more reality-based, has much more nuance, and places much bigger importance, much greater importance on human rights. Because this is what socialist movements, and this is what workers' unions, and this is the influence that they have on the political discourse. Culture in Europe doesn't belong to the rich. It is everybody's. In most of Europe, this is the case. It may be different in the UK, which is like the least socialist European country. But it's true for many of them. It's true for France. I mean, France has a big socialist base, socialist, left-leaning, and the US doesn't have it. So this makes a lot of difference. And when they have an actual left-wing presence, socialist presence, a humanist presence, they cannot they cannot support an open genocide, and definitely not forever. Workers' unions are going to speak, and socialist parties are going to speak as they do, and when we see it. And as part of this identity, of European identity and the makeup of European society and European political system and European consciousness, Europe has a history, very recent history, of what happens when they give in to fascism and dictatorial urges. They remember it well, and they don't want to go there. And they certainly don't want to go there for Israel and Zionism. Because this is the shift that the West is now required to do. People are being required, countries are being required to willingly step into a Zionist rule, Zionist dictatorship. Now it's no longer general, I support Israel, I arm Israel, I look away when Israel builds settlements. Now is I shut up when Israel mass murders children and starves babies. And this is something people cannot accept. They definitely cannot accept it if they have the thinnest and weakest backbone. They cannot stand for it. Whereas in the US, because everything is made up and it's all image, you can create an image where you are moral and you are righteous and you represent God and you speak to God every day while murdering children. There's no problem. There's no conflict. This kind of derangement cannot happen in much of Europe. It cannot happen. So this is another difference. And there are two more. One, Europe doesn't have huge, large Jewish communities. The US does. For many historical reasons, the bulk of Jews, the bulk of Jewish life has moved to the US. It's not in Europe anymore. And it's not only the Holocaust. Immigration out of Europe and into the US began decades before the Holocaust. These are long-term historical processes. But this is the situation today. Jews live in Palestine and in the US. So they don't have the power and influence in Europe that they do in Washington. And it makes a big difference. It is one of the reasons. And this is such a such a tragic admission, because historically, Jews in the West were the engine of progress, socialism, workers' rights, the fight against racism. What Zionism did to them, what Zionism did to Jews, is it joined them with fascists. Because fascists and white supremacists are the one who truly love Israel. Because Israel kills Arabs. Israel swallows Arab lands. Fantastic. We want to see the brown people destroyed. So if the Jews are doing this, fantastic. We will support them. So instead of being on the side of progress and humanism and solidarity and anti-racism, Jews stupidly, and when we look back at it, a generation from now, or maybe even 10 years from now, we will be able to see how tragic this mistake was. Nevertheless, it happened. It already happened. But Jews don't have the same political influence in Europe as they do in the US. And finally, what also saves Europe is it has large Muslim communities. And Muslims in Europe today fulfill the job or the place the Jews had decades ago. Because Muslims now in Europe push the European system to be more socialist, more human rights oriented, more freedom of speech oriented, more tolerant of the other, and not hateful of the other. This is the influence of Muslim immigration now in Europe. And this is funny because we always hear about how dangerous Islam is and how dangerous Muslim immigrants are for European or Western societies. But in reality, it is the opposite. It is what's saving Europe from fascism now, today. Muslim voters in Europe always vote for left-wing workers' parties, socialist parties, anti-war parties. They don't vote for pro-war, pro-racism, pro-fascism, pro-censorship parties. They don't identify with those powers. And this is another reason, and also they cannot support Israel and Zionism, of course. This doesn't even have to be said. As Zionism and Israel task themselves with exterminating and destroying the Palestinian people, and who knows who else. So all these factors together, identity, proximity, socialism, and the existence of a left-wing demographic, which is ideological, okay? And the smaller influence of Zionist and Jewish communities and Muslim immigration in relatively large numbers, and also the tradition of Europe. And in Europe, a commitment to human rights is completely different than it is in the US. This is not an intellectual issue for Europeans because they remember what happened to their societies when they began marking people for destruction, when they began silencing the opposition. And by the way, some European parties under American influence are trying to do this in Europe today for the sake of fighting Russia, which is a completely British and American vision. It has nothing to do with the interests of Europe itself, certainly not Germany. But there is a much more solid, crisp, concrete resistance to these trends in Europe than we can find in the US. And the combination of all these factors and the influence of Christian Zionism, which is much stronger in the US than it is in Europe, the evangelism, all this, how shall I call them? All these political inventions, they just, the ability of white people and white societies to make up stuff, completely make up stuff themselves, and then believe it like this is actual divine stuff. It's not only them. Other people have done it. Brown people and black people have done it. But white people continue to do it. In the US, they continue to invent histories and identities and what they mean. Like, they still do it today. They made up this whole notion that as Christians, they have to support the state of Israel and to cause an end of days war where those people will be destroyed and the Messiah would come and Christ will. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? And this is normal. This is normal. This is the belief of millions of people. And this country goes around the world and bomb people and call them backward and primitive and undeveloped and unscientific and uncivilized. They think they are civilized. This is the joke of these days. I think that this split is going to increase and send the Europe and the US. I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but if this is going to increase and widen this split, because Europe cannot allow to be run by Zionism and to allow Zionism to commit an actual extermination and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. This is an impossible sell in Europe. And in the US, it's okay. It's okay. Democrats don't want to talk about it. Republicans don't really care. Christian Zionists push for it. So it makes a big, big difference. And it's going to be very interesting to follow this. I mean, Israel is splitting humanity, and it is splitting the West like scientists split the atom in a physics lab. It is actually splitting humanity. And by pursuing this path of open cruelty and derangement and always escalating and doubling down and not relenting and never reconsidering, never showing, never giving humanity, always the lie, always the propaganda, always the accusation, always the shaming of the other. I mean, they are trying to shame people who spoke for Gaza for a killing of 2 people in a supposed terrorist attack they had nothing to do with, while they support the mass murder of 100,000, 200,000, 1 million Palestinians, no problem. So they do both things at the same time. Shaming for 2 people, supporting the killing of 1 million. So this kind of attitude, this kind of behavior is going to force everyone to make a choice. No one is going to be able to escape this. And the more they delay this choice, the more they delay and procrastinate and take their time and don't contain Israel, every day they delay this. Every day they delay this, doing this to Israel and telling Israel enough. You can't run wild here anymore. Can't do this anymore. Every day they delay this, they get compromised further. And as we can see in the US, you can see this almost from day to day. The conversation becomes more and more deranged and detached and disconnected from reality, like this insane spectacle behind me. This is the influence of unmitigated Zionism, allowed endless, infinite access and influence. This is the result. And we're going to follow and see how this split develops. And finally, I think that after this split personality phase, we are going to move to the phase of actual implications. Actual things that happen in reality and prevent Israel from going on and doing more of what it's doing. This is what's coming next. But how long this split personality phase of doing both, criticizing and condemning while supporting, how long this phase is going to last, this is a mystery to me. It could be a week, it could be 3 years. We'll wait and see. See you in the next video.